this one is more on wireless security, things to think about security wise, in your home. Um, so, kind of the theme of these tech talks. So, they came to me. I just recently started working with Sunset Learning. I used to be part of another company Sunset bought. So, extensive background with wireless. I mean, that's pretty much all I do. I don't do any wired. Um, Between Wi-Fi and radios, I mean, I've got 45 years of experience doing wireless. So, um, when they asked me to do these tech talks, I thought, with people working from home, you know, kind of going over that theme and things to think about in your home. So the first couple of sessions were more about channels and power and things like that. This is more about security, you know, talking about default settings, default username, passwords, things like that. They'll talk about encryption, VPN solutions, firmware, password, and then I was going to go over a little bit of attack tools and how to build your own penetration testing tools. And it's pretty easy to do, and you can actually test your network. But how secure is your home network? I think one of the things, I started out as a security guy. I was a firewall guy, and then when I got into wireless, they kind of went together. And had 20 years in the Marine Corps and working on radios. I worked on crypto equipment too. So kind of been able to apply, different things that I've done in my life. And one of the things I always find it kind of fascinating about security, the other company I was with, we actually wrote wireless security classes for Cisco. And I was always amazed that I would probably say the least attended classes that I've ever done as an instructor have been the security ones. And I always thought that would be the more important stuff. But I think sometimes people treat the security like insurance, and I really don't need it, right? Till something happens. And I think it is a compromise between convenience and security, because when you do security right, people complain. Now, at home, it's more of, I wouldn't say a convenience, but then again, it's more of financial, right? Nobody runs Radius at home. So we're generally doing personal or pre-shared keys in there. But just like wireless in an enterprise, wireless in your home, the problem with wireless in general is there is no boundary, right? That RF goes out however far, the power is on your access point. And I think that's the hardest part, because I don't have to be in your building. I could be in a parking lot in there. But same with, I used to, when I did security, people's attitude at home where I don't have anything anybody wants on my computer, but they do. Once they gain access, they want your computer. They want to use that to launch attacks against other things in there. So, a lot of it is just, I think anyways, with security is common sense approach. And one of the basics is the default settings, change them. I remember when, wireless, when I first got into it, and what was really popular back then was Linksys wireless routers. And the default SSID was Linksys. Um, there was no security, and the IP address was 192.168.0.1, and then it was admin. That was the default. And you could drive around neighborhoods, and 50% of the time, you could access somebody's wireless router just because they never changed the defaults. And funny story, I was doing a wireless class in, I was actually in Colorado, and it was at a Marriott. This is years ago. And so we rented one of the rooms there, and I'm doing the training class, and I needed internet access to do the labs. And so I'm talking to the lady. I said, we got internet access, et cetera, et cetera. She goes, yeah. You just connect to that. You'll see the SSID. So I go down in the classroom, the room we had, and it was Linksys. And I was like, there's no way. So I go back to the front desk. That's the only thing I see is Linksys. Yeah, that's the one. You just connect to that and use it. And sure as heck, it was defaulted. And so I log into this default wireless router, and I change the Linksys SSID to Marriott, and I set up a security key. And on lunch break, everybody goes out to lunch. I was sitting in the lobby, and they had signs in the business center that the computers were down. I thought, well, that's odd. And I was talking to the lady at the desk and they were having computer problems. And I'm like, I started thinking, I thought, holy crap, they've got their network. Everybody in the hotel is connecting to this open Linksys SSID. So I go back in and I change it back to defaults. I pop back out to the room, to the outside room there. And sure as heck, you could watch all the computers going up. So I've always, people make security hard. It doesn't have to be. And even like penetration testing, I used to do it years and years ago, and I wasn't a hacker by any means. I just know people are lazy. Um, but you are CWNT. That's cool. So you do teach all of them, Martin?
Can you hear me? Yes, I do.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm based in Sweden, if you wonder.
Oh, are you? Yeah, I'm in Texas. So
You have colder than me then.
yeah, yep. In fact, my pipes froze. I have no water. I've been out with water since Sunday.
It's 32 here.
Oh yeah. It got above freezing today. The snow's starting to melt, but we're gonna get more snow tonight.
Yeah, we got like uh, five 5 inches this night. So for real first snowfall this year.
Oh yeah. I've never been up there. I would like to come up to Sweden sometime.
Okay, I would like to come
So
to. I will be in Texas in September probably.
oh you are?
Yeah, if the conference goes ahead. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
the one in Dallas?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I live just north of San Antonio.
Okay.
So yep.
In
You
the
like Dallas. There's a lot of things to do there. So yeah, just the default settings, and that goes even on the enterprise side, but side by just changing your default SNMP strings and things like that. People just don't do. So to me, security requires a little extra step. Most people are too lazy to do that, but you can search on Google default username passwords, and most of them are either root, admin, super user with blank password, like the Kali Linux, the username is root, the password is Tor. Now they changed it, the default's Kali username, Kali password. So, again, you got to get in the habit of changing the default in there. Now, network vulnerability is the other thing, is ports and open ports. And, several years ago, there was an article about those Airbnbs where they were hiding cameras um, in the rooms and stuff. And so I was reading the article about how to find out things like that. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen or played around with Fing. Fing is an app you can download off the App Store. I'm assuming they have an Android version of it. I'm just not sure. But it's a powerful tool. You don't want to use Fing in your enterprise. Security guys don't like that, and it'll actually pop up. But download Fing on your iPhone, iPad, and connect your own network, and you'll be kind of amazed um, what ports and vulnerabilities you have. So here's Fing, and then all you do is you connect to your network. Once you connect to your network, you just scan devices, and what I'll do is you can actually, this thing profiles, so you can actually see it discovers devices and tells you what they are. And so this device right here is it's a Linux, my Kali Linux box that I have RDP sessions set up to go into. But just to kind of show you, notice how you can um, find open ports. So you click that find open ports, and I'm not going to do all that stuff. And then notice right off the bat, so you can see port 22, which is SSH, and then that MS term server is remote desktop for Microsoft. So now you can see it's open. And the fact that these types of tools on your network, somebody gets on a network now, and think of this, of how many times you connect to an open guest network, and you don't think about it. And I'm on that guest network. I run Fing, and I've actually done this just to kind of see. I was curious in a network, and so now you start it profile. So identify the device, and then now I just go, oh, you got SSH open. I wonder if you use the default admin account, and you go from there. And that's what the attackers do. They just it's the simple things that you forget about that they prey on and take advantage of it. But it kind of eye opening to see what you have open on your devices, and you may want to look at shutting some of those ports down. Now, what's really popular now is the whole Internet of Things devices. And again, back to the default settings. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Shodan. Now, this thing has changed over the years. Free to create an account, but some of the stuff you got to be careful when you're on the site. But it's like they say, it's one of the most dangerous search engines that's out there. I'm not kidding you. So it's free to create an account. And what this thing does is, like you can see, you can explore Internet of Things, monitor network security, etc. But it has this explore the search engine, and there's actually industrial control systems out there. I was playing around with this at one time, and I actually was connected into the wind turbines up in Austin in there. So here, most of these are, you can see, are webcams, and I'm not going to do that because I don't. I'm not secure on this laptop, and this is my work laptop. Um, and I can't lose stuff because some of their stuff is set up as honeypot, so they get you to connect into it, and then but what they do is they go out and collect this database like default passwords. I mean, you think about nowadays, and I was just doing this scanning a network, and I noticed in the neighborhood somebody's got one of those refrigerators that you can connect in to see. I mean, it's actually connecting, and I can see it connecting back to their network in there. So devices like that, they just go through and they get default passwords, username, passwords. But what was amazing, I was playing around one time, and it's these cameras. And what's the scary part is you can see, they tell you what the provider is, who connects to them. So you can search by countries in here. So we can click on the United States, for example. And this is actually Richardson, which is near Dallas. And this one actually is a honeypot, so you got to be careful with it. But most of them, and again, I'm not going to do it, but just to show you real quick, they'll connect, and most of them will get a login page. And if they do, you can figure out what device it is, and you can just try default username and passwords, and eventually you get into it. And I've connected into remote cameras people had posted in their houses. And the thing is, it actually is a map on some of these that even give you GPS coordinates. So um, it's pretty intense, and just kind of amazing in how easy it is just on default settings. You don't even have to know anything, and the equipment and things that you can see and get into. And so just remember that when you're installing, you know, smart the smart light bulbs, and all those Internet of Things in your home that make it easier. That, again, even your cars now, right? The cars have Wi-Fi in, and if they're not changing the default, um, you're just making it easier for them. It's the difference between, a car thief. It's easier to steal a car with the keys left in it than the one that's locked, right? And that's all kind of around just basic, default settings in there. So same with network name. Some vendors by default have like the router, the wireless router's name. It's the vendor. A lot of the ISPs, I notice in my area, it's Guadalupe Valley is my ISP. It's a co-op, and all their provided wireless boxes, I can always tell in the neighborhood who has them because the default name is GVTC whatever. Nobody changes that. And some of the GVTC boxes are actually Cisco boxes, some are other vendors. And again, if you know that, you can actually search and find what they use for default username and passwords a lot of times. Now, some of them now have numbers on the side of the boxes, but it makes it easier. And then there's always those security practices of, don't broadcast your SSID and MAC filters. Those days are over. And as far as trying to hide a network, I guess in your home, it's not that bad of an idea, but just understand that just because you hide the SSID or don't broadcast it, it's not a security feature, because all it does is it takes the SSID out of the beacon, but it's always contained in probe responses. So all you have to do is generate a probe request, capture the response. I'll tell you what your SSID is, and I'll show you how easy it is later on, and I'll demo that. So again, know that that's not a security feature. In an enterprise, same thing. You're actually better off broadcasting your SSID. Some devices like Android and Apple, if you don't broadcast the SSID and they connect, they refrain from scanning certain channels for a certain period of time. Now, it doesn't seem like much, but when a device roams, it has to build the list. And how does it build the list? Is it scans. So when you don't broadcast your SSID, that device kind of gets a short list. So to me, you're always better off broadcasting it because it's not a security feature. But people still seem to think, well, it keeps the average person out. Well, if they want it, trust me, it's that easy to get. So part of the 802.11 standard Wi-Fi came out. I don't think they initially thought about security and things like that. Um, but eventually, there really wasn't no authentication. The authentication was open and the encryption was a WEP. And at one time, they even had what they called shared key authentication, which was a WEP key that was used to authenticate the client, which is really ridiculous. So as far as weak, yes, I don't even know why people mention it anymore. It shouldn't be used. I don't even know why. I still see it. You'll still see some of these older like HP printers that default to ad hoc mode and still use a WEP key. Just know it's a weak 24-bit initialization vector. It's really easy to crack. Nowadays, nothing even defaults to it. So I don't know why they even sometimes bring it up. I just mentioned just to show you that's an older one. So they already knew WEP was broke. The IEEE hadn't ratified 802.11i yet, which was the security standard. So the Wi-Fi Alliance, in a stopgap, introduced WPA. WPA took the existing WEP key and wrapped it into a temporary key integrity protocol, or TKIP. It was a stronger encryption. It was a 48-bit versus a 24. And it added what they called the MIC, or message integrity check. Message integrity check. The MIC is kind of like, think of a MIC as wax seal on an envelope, right? King sends his messenger. If the wax seal is broke, we don't trust it. So that's what this MIC was added in there for. So, I mean, it was strong, but it was just intended for a stopgap. So eventually 802.11i gets ratified and WPA2 gets introduced. Now, WPA2 bumped up the encryption to 128 block cipher, and then it just expanded on some of the things WPA already did in there. That is the default on most home wireless routers. On most enterprise, it defaults to WPA2 as as the encryption. Now, WPA, WPA2 are the certification. They test for the certification of that capability. You can actually go to the Wi-Fi Alliance, verify wi-fi.org, and you can verify the certification for your devices. Now, a new security standard coming out is WPA3. So we talked this morning about 802.11ax or Wi-Fi 6. So Wi-Fi 6 is going to introduce this WPA3. Right now, depending on what you have for a wireless router, you may be able to do both. So some devices now are supporting WPA3 by itself. Some have backward compatibility. So when I talk about that security setting, again, this is my Cisco controller. So if you look at the WLAN settings here, there's the security settings, the security tab. And if you notice, again, it's WPA2 and AS is the encryption. That's the default on most everything. Now, in at home, since you probably don't have a radius server, you're doing a pre-shared key or passphrase, right? But I don't have the option to do, WPA3. Now I also have an Aruba access point. This is Aruba's cloud-based stuff. And this one does do Wi-Fi 6. And if you notice, I can do WPA3 and WPA2 personal. So I can do both. Now, iPhone 11 and newer, they can do WPA3 now. So if I connect my iPhone to this, you'll see that it actually does WPA3. This is a really cool security feature that they're adding with WPA3. So one of the vulnerabilities that we'll talk about, particularly with your home network, is you're using a passphrase, right? A pre-shared key. Your pre-shared key that you type in, that ASCII character, it becomes a hex number. That hex number becomes what they call a pairwise master key. And then from the pairwise master key, when you connect, it does a four-way handshake. And part of this four-way handshake is it's deriving what they call pairwise transit keys. That's what feeds your encryption. The attacks, what they do is they know how that pairwise master key is derived because it's from your passphrase. So they just have to capture the four-way handshake and they do brute force dictionary attacks against your passphrase. And if your passphrase that you type in at home is in a dictionary, I can get it in about 5 seconds. So, you know, you got to have, it's not just strong passphrases or strong passwords. It's all about entropy. It's combinations. So this is addressed in WPA3. WPA3 uses what they call simultaneous authentication of equals. SAE is the same thing that you do now when you guys are doing WPA2 personal at home. What's cool about this simultaneous authentication equals, I'll give you my passphrase. I don't care. The only thing me giving you my passphrase is you'll be able to get on my network, but you will not be able to unencrypt my data. Each person that connects uses different keys and derives keys independently, and it's like virtually impossible to figure it out. So they won't be able to crack that passphrase. The other feature is that if they do a brute force attack against it, I think it's like 3 attempts, it locks that device out, locks the client out. So it's got features in there to prevent these attacks. The other neat thing about WPA3 is this opportunistic wireless encryption. Like I mentioned before, is that guest networks, a lot of people connect to them. You go to hotspots, you go on vacation, whatever. Those are completely open networks most of the time. You may go to some kind of login page, and that was probably about the only secure part of it. There is no encryption. So what this OWE does, think of it as it's almost like auto encryption. So when you connect an open get network that's set up for OWE and you support it, you'll automatically encrypt your data. So those are some great features in WPA3. Now that's probably going to require hardware um, uh, um, upgrades for your equipment as well as probably your clients in there. But one of the best solutions that's still out there is VPNs. I know most of you probably use VPNs while you're working from home to get back to work, but I again traveled a lot over the years as a Cisco instructor. I mean, there was times I was on the road, 80% of the time, and you're always connecting to different Wi-Fi. And my attitude is nothing is safe. I even have that same attitude with my network. So I always VPN. I have VPNs. I use them all the time. I have them on my phone. I mean, I use it all the time. A lot of VPNs I probably use more for online privacy. And you know, a lot of our devices are getting more and more sophisticated because they tell you when, you know, hey, they can see you kind of thing pops up. And you know, those advertisements that you get because it knows your ISPs in San Antonio and things like that. So I probably do VPNs. One is more privacy, but also security when I traveled a lot. Now it's more privacy. It's, to me, it's more hiding it. So VPNs, there's, you know, one is, it does allow you to be anonymous for the most part, safer online when you're in open networks, I should say. Um, and then as far as VPNs, again, they don't cover all online tracks, but they do a pretty good job of it. I mean, if you're one of those secret squirrel type guys, and if you're young, you don't know who Secret Squirrel is, but there are other ways that these attackers can do that in there. But there are free VPN solutions out there, but there's generally a good reason why it's free. You know, they're popping up browsing, and or they're collecting browsing information. So free is never free. Subscription VPNs, you know, there's a ton of commercials nowadays with NordVPN. You know, I use, it's called PIA. I've had it for years. Um, Personal Internet Access, I think it's called. When that company first came out, you know, they offered a deal for like a lifetime subscription, and that's what I use now. At one time, my firewall at home, I had a VPN set up through that, but I got tired of being on the road and having to troubleshoot stuff, so I just ended up going to subscription. So um, VPNs, I think they should be used more. Don't rely on, you know, the underlying security, just another layer in there. Now, firmware, typically those manufacturers have updates and address vulnerabilities. And a lot of people, I know I'm one of those that I don't like auto update, particularly on my laptops. I hate it. But at the same time, there's a reason why they do the updates, and that's vulnerabilities. And most consumers do not um, download and install updates, whether it's their wireless router, their phones. I mean, do most of you keep your devices up to date? Hey, Rob, I just seen you're in there. Um, I look at my wife's, she was having a problem with her phone. And I had bought her an iPad last year for Christmas or something. And she had not updated her phone. I mean, it was, I don't know how many updates behind on their phone. And last time I went visited my mom, same thing. I'm like, you see all those red, the red bombs there, right? They don't update. And there's a reason the updates, and then most of the time it's because of vulnerabilities. So you want to keep things up to date. Now, the problem is sometimes we all know you update and it just causes more problems, but for the most part, I try to do the updates. I try to keep things updated. What I generally do, my rule of thumb is I don't auto update. So I try to read release notes before I do that. Know what you're jumping into, because you know the vulnerability, maybe it doesn't apply to you. But one of the big ones here recently was what they called the crack attack. And so I mentioned before about how, you know, it does that four-way handshake and it derives your encryption keys. Well, there was a vulnerability in that four-way handshake, and they exploited this in what they called a crack attack. If you get a chance to Google crack attack, it's a pretty amazing article. This college kid writing a paper discovered this vulnerability. It was ridiculous. And the fix was keeping your update. So if you didn't update, or if vendors didn't update the drivers in their devices, you could potentially still be vulnerable in there. But a really good site. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Um, God dang it. Which I used to use a lot when I was a security guy, network guy, is this MITRE site. There's several repositories out there that will show you vulnerabilities, but you can go in and search. and it lists, and it's a big record of these that get inputted from all the different vendors, and so you can search your particular equipment. If you know CVE numbers, you can search it that way too. But you can search equipment, and then a list of vulnerabilities. A lot of I know, like with Cisco controllers. Um, Cisco has this tool, for example, this config analyzer. What this does is it can take your config file and analyze it for vulnerabilities. So based on code versions you're running. So I have an old config file here somewhere. Here it is. Just to kind of show you what I mean. So this particular one, if I go under the controller messaging, you can see it's telling me that I'm on a not recommended code, and it telling me where to go look. But right here, wireless control is vulnerable to CVE 2017. Well, I can go to that site and look this up. And what this vulnerability was that crack attack. So if you were running Cisco controllers 83112 or older, you were vulnerable to that attack, which basically what the attack allowed them to do is get your encryption keys. So different vendors have tools like that, can show you vulnerables. You can look them up at sites like that, but just be aware of, without keeping things up to date, you can be vulnerable to things like that. And as I mentioned before with security, we don't run Radius at home. We're not doing 802.x authentication, AAA, right? So we do personal. And enterprises to me should not be doing passphrase or WPA2 personal. But sometimes, particularly like in healthcare, you got these devices, that's all they can do. And so what are you going to do, right? You got to make the device work. You're going to make the device works. But the passphrase that it uses, again, on the four-way handshake, this passphrase you type in eventually becomes what they call a pairwise master key, like I said. Um, so the attackers know how the four-way handshake, what it does, and a lot of it, these numbers and stuff are based on MAC address information. They can capture that, and all they have to do is capture the four-way handshake. Well, I can only do that once you connect it. So now what they do is they flood your network with the authentication packets. So the client says, oh, the AP wants me to de-authenticate, okay, and then you let them reconnect, and then you can capture at that point in there. So you want to avoid anything in the dictionary. Even how we do our password policies, not even just passphrases, but password policies in general, is, it's uppercase, lowercase, special symbols, 12 characters, et cetera, et cetera. And the problem with password complexity is, to meet your password policies, you got this absurd rule that you never remember your passphrase or your password. So this can go both ways. It could be your password that you log in with. This could be the passphrase you use to connect to your wireless. But if it's too complex, people write it down. So to me, that's worthless in a security in there. And on top of that, like they're showing you here. Here is the upper left-hand corner. It's a complex. This thing's going to meet every password complexity requirement. It's got numbers. It's got uppercase, lowercase, special symbols. But if you look at it, it's the entropy. It's the randomness, right? And with this, even though it meets your requirement, there's only 28 bits of entropy. So these tools can do 1,000 guesses a second. They could get that password in 3 days. Now, the other thing that they do with these tools is they launch the attacks against a dictionary. And I said they literally take the English dictionary and go attack, right? And try all these combinations. And then they know, well, people change, um, threes with ats, or zeros with O's, etc. They just built dictionaries. The other thing is every time that you get that notification about databases being compromised, we think our database is it's not they got your credit card information. That's okay. But that's not what they want most of the time. Sometimes it is, but it's the data because they want the passwords. Those passwords just feed into this giant dictionary of all these different passwords, and they just launch it against there. And instead, they're pretty smart on that. So what it's about though is entropy, and this is a great example. Look at correct horse battery staple. 4 random words, right? That's 44 bits of entropy there. It would take 500 years plus for the attack to guess that password. But if you try to type correct horse battery staple into your password, for example, at work, it would tell you don't meet your complexity, but that is actually stronger than the one above. And on top of that, it's probably easier to memorize in there. Now, the other cool thing, I'll show you this real quick. Cloudflare, which is the DNS guys, they do, this is their entropy, is they actually have a wall of lava lamps. I think there's 100 something of these lava lamps. Here you go. So does it tell you on this page? You got to go to, 100 lava lamps. So there's 100 lava lamps that this camera's on. I don't know if you ever know what a lava lamp is. Have you ever seen them? They're never the same, right? So you got to think about those bubbles bubbling in that lava lamp changes. The entropy is like ridiculous. It's trillions of years to try even crack that thing, if you could. So that's what they do for their security is this camera is on this and it's constantly using that to feed the encryption in there. So it's all about entropy. It's more about complexity, but unfortunately, our security policies are about complexity, not entropy, when it should be entropy. So that's something to think about on your passphrase for your home network. And a lot of people think, well, what do I care if nobody wants anything? Yeah, they do. They want your computer to use attacks in there. So there are different types of wireless attacks. Now, what's the likelihood of you being attacked in your neighborhood? Probably pretty slim. But maybe in a coffee shop, public Wi-Fi, I would think there's probably more chances that is. So rogue wireless devices are just devices that connect to your network. They're not part of your network. Most of the attacks, I would say, wireless are generally denial of service type attacks. Nothing, well, actually, the denial of service attacks intent is to kick you off a network. Well, why do they want to kick you off your network? Is because they want to try to get you to join their network. So you got evil twin attacks, you've got, peer-to-peer attacks, things like that. So there are a lot of different tools that they use to do that. Now the big thing is, and this is kind of, I've actually done this, is what these attackers do in a lot of this to get you off is they spoof the MAC address of your wireless router. And then I send a deauthentication packet. So the client thinks that his AP wants to deauthenticate. And then you rejoin, I can capture that. Well, you can do the same thing now to like wireless security cameras. You can capture the area and you can figure out MAC addresses, search MAC addresses. Eventually you can figure out it's a wireless camera. Once you get the MAC address of that transmitter, because those wireless cameras you have, they're transmitters. They're transmitting back either to your access point or to a hub, but it's transmitting. So once you figure that out, it connects just like a device does most of the time. And you can do the same thing. You can do deauth attacks against these security cameras. They don't work really well. I did it against mine, and like every other frame seems to drop. You can see it go in and out. It doesn't completely stop it. Maybe if I had a more powerful radio or more radios to do it, maybe it would be permanent, but you can do that against a lot of different tools in there. So building your own penetration test box, it's simple. And one of the things I tell people all the time nowadays, particularly if you're an IT and you're a network guy, two things you want to learn: Linux and Python, because that's what networking is about. A lot of the Cisco switches are software based, it's Linux. And everything controller wise is API integration. So API is software talking to software through Python scripting, and that's what it's all about. So I don't know if any of you dabble with Linux, but it's pretty simple to build. Kali Linux is one of the better known distributions for penetration because the tools are built into it. It's kind of one-stop shop. So this is you can search Raspberry Pi with Kali Linux and you can see the site that'll pop up. Oops. It won't let me do that.
Ja, men jag vill ha ett par till.
The Raspberry Pis you can buy on Amazon, anywhere. I mean, it just kind of depends. You just got to research if you're interested in building a box. But this tells you, steps you through. There's pre-built versions. You can go to Amazon, search Raspberry Pi. There's variations of this. There's pumpkin pie, where they oh, come on. Raspberry Pi 4 I just built, but this is everything you need. SD card, you can see 99.99. There's 159, which is the B plus, which is fine too. Here's just the board. You know, if you have cases, you can modify. I've seen some crazy stuff they do with these, where they put them in line, they build them into a power strip, and you think you're plugging your PC into a power strip. You're actually plugging into one of these things, and they do man in the middle attack. So it's crazy, but you can research it. They're pretty straightforward to build. I mean, having a little bit of Linux background, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I know enough to be dangerous. For the most part, I can do most everything, and then when I don't use it for a while, I forget everything, and then I have to, search things. But there's Linux for Dummy books that are really basic and help you in there. Now, that's one way to do it. I actually had an old laptop that I wiped out the Windows off of it, and I made a Kali Linux laptop that it makes it really handy. But Raspberry Pis are great because you can plug them in your network. You set up RDP into the thing, and you don't need a monitor. I mean, they have HDMI cabling and everything you need, but you can just RDP into it. Optionally is this VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a free version of like VM running on Windows. Now, that one is a pain. I have it set up on my Surface. They have the images here. They tell you how to do it all right here. VirtualBox is free. You can see right here. They have the VirtualBox images you can download right off this site. So they've already done that. The problem is running virtual VM or even VirtualBox on a Windows is trying to get Windows to release your wireless card. And I've experimented with different wireless cards, and I can get my Linux up, but I can't get it to fully take control over my wireless card. So it's kind of worthless. I can only do certain things versus what I can do in there. So you can do it. It's just that one, the VirtualBox requires a little bit more work trying to figure out how to make things work. You got to find the right card as well. And there's alpha cards. Most of the RA Link type drivers, the Theros drivers work really well with that. So, but one of the other things when you build these box, and this is one of if anybody's ever seen Fifth Element with Bruce Willis, it's old, but when they finds that girl and he takes her to the priest and he tries to kiss her, she pulls out the gun and says, "See no ectogamma." And he says, what did she say? And he translated, "Never without my permission." So remember, when you're doing this, if it's your network, hey, You're penetration testing your network, but don't be doing somebody else's, remember, don't do anything without permission in there. But as far as discovering hidden SSIDs, I just want to show you real quick how easy that is. So what I have here is I'm going to create a WLAN, which I think I already have. Yep, I do. And I'm going to enable this SSID, and it's called You Cannot Hide. And I have broadcast SSID turned off. Now, my card I currently have in there, I'm doing 2.4 only just so it's easier. So now I have this SSID. Now, so this is my Kali Linux that I'm going to RDP into. And it has some pretty cool tools already built into this thing. A lot of it is command line, but it's still got several commands kind of similar to a Windows. One of them is iwconfig, and think of iwconfig as like you're looking at your wireless. Now, notice I have this one is called WLAN2 Mon. So what I did is there's a program called Airodump-ng, Airmon-ng. So what I did through this Airmon-ng is I put one of my wireless cards, and if you notice, I actually have three. I have WLAN 0, 1, and 2 plugged into my Raspberry Pi, and I put one of them into monitor mode is what I have done. And the command is just airmon-ng start WLAN 10, whatever one you want to do. And then you'll see that once the command runs, it puts it in a monitor mode, and you just verify it by seeing that. And then part of the suite is there's an Airodump. And Airodump is kind of like, I guess, just a dump. It's a capture of all the SSID. So now you just do Airodump-ng, and then WLAN, WLAN to monitor. So I'm telling it, hey, the one I got in a monitor, that, hey, just dump for me. So it's just doing a scan. So notice it starts picking up the SSIDs. Now, there are other commands that you can do. You can be specific of what channels you want to listen to, things like that. But see, you have the BSSID. That's the MAC address for your SSID. It also shows you the power. So it's showing you what the strongest ones, the beacon periods, data, and then you'll see the channels. But notice the one SSID, it's called, I can't highlight this, but it says GDUNC. It's the second one down. If you notice, it's WPA3. If you look at my security, it's SAE. That's that simultaneous authentication equals. So that's that Aruba one that I was showing you that does WPA3. So when I connect to it with my iPhone, which I currently am, it actually connects with WPA3. So the other ones that say linked and then 0, those again are generally, those are the non-broadcasted SSIDs. So you can actually see there's several here in my neighborhood. Now, what I could do then is I could target specific ones, and you can actually see one of them is even set to open. I don't think that's mine. So you could target specific ones. I'm not, and then what you do is come on, I can't get out. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. It won't let me out. Hold on for a minute. My screen locked up when I already RDP'd into that. So hold on. I'm not sharing anymore, am I? God dang it. Oh, there it is. The screen minimizes and I can't get to it. We'll try this again. All right, so now we go back to this Kali Linux, it froze up, but you can see the various ones that say linked in there. So now I'm going to do is normally what you do is you could set up another program where you could capture. What you basically do is you target the one that's not broadcasted, and you see if there's clients connected to it, and then you de-auth them and then get them to connect. You don't even have to do that. What you can do is just connect. You can wait for somebody to connect to the SSID. So that's what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to connect to this SSID. Now, eventually, once this client connects, and he just did, we should see it pop up. See it, the third one down says you cannot hide. So normally, again, there's other ways to do it where that's the one I want. What I do is I send probes out to it, capture the probe responses. But generally, all I got to do is wait for somebody to connect. I don't have to do anything special. Is once somebody connects to it, this tool right here will capture it. It'll capture the probe response and it'll populate automatically for you. So that's again how easy it is to even unintentionally. And a lot of the tools that they have for these scanning tools, they're built in. You can say, "Oh, it's hidden. Well, find it for me," and it does a lot of that for you. So just remember, hiding the SSID doesn't really accomplish anything. So I can't get to my screen when I won't let me minimize. So that's pretty easy. So these are the tools that are built into Kali Linux, the Airodump and the Airmon. So pretty straightforward on that, and you can Google that. Now, as far as you know, guessing your pre-shared key. So normally the process, again, you can use those tools. I could scan, and from that list, I could figure out, okay, which one of those is using a pre-shared key. And then what I do is I target it. I send deauth packets. I capture the four-way handshake. And then offline, I can do a dictionary tag. Well, they've done a one-stop shop for you. This tool is called Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi pretty much scans the network. Once it scans the network, it'll show you which ones are doing what security. And then you just say, okay, pick number one. That's the one I want to attack. And it cracks it in there. So I'll try to show you this tool. Now, again, this is the Kali Linux, and you'll see it has a whole suite of tools. There's all kinds of wireless attack tools. Fern, this Wi-Fi cracker, is another attack tool that's used to get your pre-shared key or passphrase. Um, Reaver and Pixie. Um, I don't know if any of you set up your wireless at home, but one of the tools that you have is that WPS. It's a little USB dongle thing that you push the button and you put a passcode in it and it configures your client for you. That Pixie will, I can crack your WPS in literally 15 seconds. I mean, it's ridiculous how easy that is. But here's Wi-Fi. So now as it starts, it defaulted to 2.4. Now, normally if I was doing attack, you could go in there and be specific with the command and say, scan 5 gig and 2.4, whatever. This one by default is doing 2.4. Now, as they start popping up, you can see the one is called Gdonk. You can see the next two. There's another not broadcasted SSID. And then the far right, clients who's connected. But also notice there's a column that says WPS question mark. And you can see there's several devices out there that use WPS, which I don't want to do that attack, but it would, um, I have one of these set up. So now you just keep letting it scan. And when you're done, you do Control C. And now what's your target? So you literally just pick the number. Notice here somebody's wireless refrigerators. The number 17 is one of those wireless refrigerators. So, so now what it does is automatically is it launches the Pixie dust, which is it's trying to crack the vulnerability of the WPS. And this is a Netgear that I have out there that's I set up for the WPS just to show you how easy it is. So now it starts sending these EAP over LAN floods. It's trying to connect the client off, and it's going to sit there for a while, generally about 20 seconds, just taking a little bit longer. So while that's doing that, then the next question is with these attacks, one intentionally what this really was kind of used for is you set up a pre-share key for your network and you forgot it. So you don't want to have to go reset it on the device, and then you're going to have to do all the end users too. So you're trying to figure out what it is. So you'd use these tools to figure out what your pre-share key. Well, of course, somebody figured that out that they could guess everybody else's. So makes it pretty vulnerable your network. And it's again, you want to test it against yours to see how easy it is. And the thing is with these tools, there's tons of dictionaries that you can download, and you can tell it, hey, use this dictionary to attack. I don't know if I still. This is a big one. I thought I downloaded it. RockU is one of the bigger ones in there. So it's still going while that thing's doing that. So how do you protect? Here you go. Now it's so there's the pin. So notice it took a couple minutes. You can see crack WPS pin. So there's a pin that you pop into that WPS, and now you can see it crack the pre-shared key, Rapid Zoo 548. Which you would think that sounds pretty complex, but you just seen how easy it is to crack that. So how do you I think it. Sorry about that. So how do you protect yourself against these attacks? That's the thing, you know. So how do you do this? Now, just management frame protection is an optional feature on some of your devices. It's what they call 802.11w. The problem with management frame protection is most of your clients don't support it. So if you turn it on, they won't be able to connect. This is addressed in WPA3. The new security feature is that WPA3 is going to um, add management frame protection. It's going to be required in there. Optionally, you find a device with directional antenna, try to locate it and try to remove it, which that's hard to do. You can do it in Wireshark, um, but it's hard to do. Um, just recently, a friend of mine contacted, well, my son does wireless too, and it was a pretty big store in the Austin area, and somebody was doing the denial of service attack against them. And at first, I just thought that they just must have had some kind of wireless router. No, they had like a Aruba or a Cisco system in there. And there's another program called Murder Death Kill that literally it'll hop the channels in a network doing that DOF flood and preventing clients from connecting. Somebody was doing this in this area, and so the guy was asking us, how does he prevent that? And the only thing I could tell him was the only thing you can do is management frame protection. He goes, our clients don't support it. Well, you can find it and remove it is the next thing. So he's asking how to do that. You can actually go in with Wireshark and there's filters and graphs you can do in Wireshark to where you can hone in on a transmit address, and based on a signal strength and a directional antenna, you could kind of use it panning around and find signal strength. It's not accurate, but I can tell in general area where an attack is coming from, particularly if they're across the street or something like that.